In a stunning turn of events, Joni Lamb has been exposed and erased from Daystar, and the shocking reason behind it all will leave you speechless. Allegations of betrayal have surfaced, and none other than Joyce Meyer is at the heart of the drama. What really happened behind closed doors? Why is Daystar cutting ties with Joni? The truth is finally out, and it's more explosive than you could ever imagine. Stay tuned for the jaw-dropping details you won't believe. Joni Lamb's swift move toward marriage after the sudden passing of her husband Marcus Lamb raised a lot of eyebrows in the Christian media world. Just months after Marcus died, Joni made the decision to marry Dr. Dougweiss, a well-known Christian marriage counselor. This rapid shift from mourning to a new relationship caught many by surprise. For a woman who had spent decades building Daystar television with her late husband, it seemed like a drastic change. The speed at which Joni entered this new chapter of her life made people question whether she was truly ready for such a big step so soon after Marcus's death. Joni, who had always been seen as a devoted and faith-driven leader, appeared to be rushing through her grief. People within the Christian community couldn't help but wonder if this relationship was more about filling an emotional void left by Marcus, rather than a genuine romantic connection. The relationship, which blossomed quickly, raised concerns about Joni's emotional state and whether she had truly taken the time to grieve the loss of her husband properly. To some, it felt as though she was trying to move on from her pain too quickly, neglecting the healing process that should have followed such a significant loss. While some supported Joni's decision, viewing her quick rebound as a sign of strength, others felt it was a sign of instability. Many who had been followers of Daystar for years began to question her motives. Was she truly ready for a new relationship? Or was it more about trying to escape the emotional weight of her grief? This question of readiness was more than just personal. It also had implications for Daystar, the ministry that Marcus and Joni had built together. The network had always been seen as a family-run operation, with both Marcus and Joni at the helm. But now, as Joni moved forward with Doug, there was a growing sense of uncertainty about how her personal life would affect her role as the leader of Daystar. The timing of the marriage, the speed of the relationship, and the emotional strain it placed on both Joni and her followers raised important questions. Was Joni's personal life now interfering with her ability to lead? Was her emotional well-being being compromised in her pursuit of happiness so soon after losing Marcus? These concerns continued to grow as the relationship evolved, leaving many people wondering if Joni was truly capable of leading Daystar through such a significant change in her personal life. The internal tensions at Daystar Television began to surface not long after Joni Lamb's swift move toward marriage with Dr. Dougweiss. What had once been a tightly knit, family-driven operation began to show signs of strain. The Lamb family had always been at the core of Daystar's success, with Joni and her late husband Marcus leading the way as a powerful duo. But with Marcus's sudden passing and Joni's quick move into a new relationship, things started to shift. The very foundation of Daystar, built on years of shared values, faith, and family unity, was now being tested in ways no one had anticipated. Joni's decision to marry Doug Weiss, just months after her husband's death, was not the only issue stirring the pot. As she navigated her new relationship, her leadership style within Daystar began to change as well. She had always been a strong leader, but the dynamics within the network, especially among her family and close colleagues, were beginning to shift. Joni had been seen as the emotional heart of Daystar for years, often making decisions with input from others in the leadership team, including her children and longtime trusted staff members. However, as time went on, a subtle but undeniable shift started to take place. Joni began making decisions more unilaterally, without consulting the broader team or family members as much as she had before. For those closest to Joni, this change was hard to ignore. Her son, Jonathan Lamb, had always been a key figure in the network, with many believing he would eventually take on a larger leadership role. However, as Joni's influence grew, Jonathan started to feel sidelined. He had worked alongside his parents for years, learning the ropes and being groomed to eventually take on a leadership position. But with Joni's increasing control over Daystar, Jonathan felt increasingly excluded from important decision-making processes. This caused a growing sense of frustration within him, as well as a deep sense of hurt. It wasn't just about professional disagreements. It was about family, legacy, and the future of Daystar. Jonathan wasn't alone in feeling this way. Other family members and longtime Daystar staff members began to notice the shift in Joni's leadership style. Where there had once been a sense of collaboration, there was now an undercurrent of control. Staff who had worked for the network for years, who had contributed to its growth and success, now felt as though their voices were no longer valued. It was as if Joni, once the collaborative leader, had become more focused on maintaining power and control within Daystar. This change in her approach to leadership left many questioning whether she was still the same woman they had admired and trusted. The arrival of Dougweiss into the family dynamic only added more fuel to the fire. As Joni's relationship with Doug progressed, his influence within Daystar began to grow as well. While Joni defended Doug's involvement, many felt that his growing prominence within the ministry was part of a larger pattern of consolidating power. Doug, who had never been involved in the day-to-day operations of a major Christian network before, quickly rose to a position of influence within Daystar, and his presence became increasingly prominent in both the network's programming and leadership decisions. To some, Doug's involvement in Daystar was seen as a natural evolution. They believed that the ministry needed new leadership to take the network into the future. But to others, it felt like a power grab. A calculated move by Joni to surround herself with people who would support her leadership and help her maintain control of the network. As Doug's role in Daystar grew, so did the divide within the leadership team. Longtime staff members began to question the direction of the network and their place within it. The loyalty that had once been a core value of Daystar was now being tested, as many began to feel alienated by the growing concentration of power in Joni and Doug's hands. The tension between Joni and her family only grew as these leadership struggles escalated. Jonathan, in particular, found himself at odds with his mother over the future of Daystar. He had spent years learning from his father and working alongside his parents to build the ministry into the influential network it had become. But now, with Joni and Doug at the helm, Jonathan's role within the family business was unclear. He began to feel like his contributions were being overlooked and his opinions disregarded. The lack of consultation and collaboration left him feeling alienated, and the growing rift between him and his mother became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just about professional disagreements either. The tension between mother and son began to affect their personal relationship as well. Jonathan had always looked up to his mother, respected her leadership, and trusted her judgment. But now, as he saw the direction in which Daystar was heading, he couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. His mother, once the embodiment of faith, family, and integrity, was now acting in ways that seemed inconsistent with the values they had all worked so hard to build. The emotional toll this took on Jonathan was immense. He found himself torn between his loyalty to his family and his deep concerns about the future of Daystar. His relationship with his mother, once strong and unwavering, was now strained to the breaking point. As the internal tensions at Daystar grew, so did the division within the family. The once unified Lamb family, who had built Daystar together, now found themselves pulled in different directions. The network that had once been a symbol of faith, family, and ministry was now facing a crisis of leadership. The questions about Joni's ability to lead, her personal life, and her relationship with Doug were only getting louder. The network was no longer the cohesive, collaborative family operation it once was. Instead, it had become a place of internal strife, with the leadership now divided and fractured. As the pressure mounted, Joni's leadership continued to be questioned, not just by her family, but also by those within the network. Staff members who had once been loyal to her began to speak out, expressing concerns about the future of the ministry. The foundation that had once held Daystar together was now crumbling, and many were left wondering if the network would be able to survive the internal conflict that had torn it apart. The emotional and professional divide within the Lamb family was impossible to ignore. The struggle for control, the power struggles, and the shifting dynamics within the family and Daystar had reached a boiling point. As the rift between Joni and her family deepened, so did the uncertainty surrounding the future of Daystar. Would Joni be able to rebuild her relationship with her family and restore the trust that had been lost, or was the damage too great to overcome? The leadership struggles within Daystar were far from over, and the fate of the network seemed more uncertain than ever. What had once been a family-driven ministry was now a battleground, with no clear resolution in sight. In a stunning turn of events that has sent shockwaves through the Christian media world, Joyce Meyer, one of the most respected figures in the Christian community, has publicly revealed deeply troubling details about Joni Lamb's leadership at Daystar Television Network. The revelation was as shocking as it was explosive, leaving the Christian community, as well as the Daystar family, reeling from the unexpected fallout. For years, Joni Lamb and Joyce Meyer had been close allies, supporting each other through personal and professional challenges. Together they had helped to shape Daystar into the influential network it was known as, a network built on strong Christian values, faith, and community. Their friendship was one that seemed unbreakable, and their collaboration on ministry events and television projects made them one of the most powerful duos in Christian broadcasting. However, as the years went on, cracks began to form in their relationship, though few had anticipated that it would lead to such a public rift. The tension between Joni and Joyce had been simmering for some time, but it wasn't until Joyce made her bombshell revelation that everything came to a head. Joyce, a woman known for her candidness and no-nonsense approach to leadership, had grown increasingly concerned about Joni's leadership style at Daystar. Over time, she had noticed a shift in Joni's behavior, one that made her uncomfortable. What once seemed like a collaborative and family-driven operation had started to feel like a power struggle within the Lamb family, with Joni at the center of it all. Joyce Meyer's public comments about Joni Lamb's leadership were blunt and direct. She accused Joni of focusing too much on personal ambition and power, suggesting that Joni had lost sight of the values that had originally made Daystar such a successful and influential ministry. Joyce expressed concern that Joni was prioritizing her personal interests over the mission of the network and the values it was built upon. What made these comments particularly striking was that they came from Joyce herself, a woman who had worked closely with Joni for years and had been a trusted confidant. For Joyce to speak out so publicly against her former friend and colleague was nothing short of a betrayal in the eyes of many. What Joyce revealed was more than just a difference in leadership styles. She spoke about the increasing centralization of power within Daystar, with Joni increasingly making decisions unilaterally, without consulting her family or the network's leadership team. Joyce mentioned how Joni's leadership had become more authoritarian, with decisions that once involved collaboration now being made solely by Joni. This shift in power dynamics had left many within the network feeling sidelined, including Jonathan Lamb, Joni's own son, who had been groomed to take on a leadership role within the network. The fact that Joni's son felt excluded from important decisions within the family business was a key point in Joyce's revelation, highlighting just how much the internal dynamics at Daystar had shifted in recent years. But Joyce's comments didn't end there. She also pointed to the timing of Joni's relationship with Dougweiss as a turning point in her leadership. Joni's swift move toward marriage, just months after her husband Marcus's sudden death, raised eyebrows within the Christian media community. Joyce expressed concern that Joni's personal life was now overshadowing her role as the leader of Daystar. To Joyce, this rapid move toward marriage signaled a lack of emotional readiness on Joni's part, and made her question whether Joni was truly fit to lead the network. The fallout from Joyce's revelation was immediate and intense. Fans of both women were left in shock, unsure of what to believe. Some sided with Joyce, agreeing that Joni's leadership had become increasingly erratic and self-serving. They felt that Joyce's comments were justified, pointing to the changes in Daystar's operations and the way Joni had handled decisions in the wake of Marcus's death. Others, however, stood by Joni, insisting that she was simply doing what was necessary to move forward with her life and the ministry. They felt that Joyce's comments were unwarranted, and that Joni had every right to make decisions for her own personal happiness and the future of Daystar. For those within Daystar, the impact of Joyce's revelation was felt deeply. The network, once known for its unity and strong family values, now found itself divided. Staff members who had long been loyal to Joni began to question her leadership and the direction the network was heading. Some felt that Joyce's comments had exposed the cracks in the foundation of Daystar, and that the network was no longer the family-centered ministry it had once been. Others felt that Joni's leadership was no longer in line with the values that had made Daystar so successful in the first place. The fallout also raised questions about the future of Daystar and the Lamb family's involvement in the network. Joni had been the face of the ministry for years, and her leadership had helped guide the network through both triumphs and challenges. But now, with Joyce Meyer's public criticisms and the internal tensions brewing at Daystar, many wondered if it was time for a new direction. Some speculated that the Lamb family's grip on the network was weakening, while others wondered if Joni would be able to repair the damage done to her reputation and restore faith in her leadership. For Joni, the emotional toll of the public fallout was immense. As a woman who had dedicated her life to the ministry, the damage to her reputation and the loss of trust among those closest to her were devastating. Joni had always prided herself on being a strong, faith-driven leader. But now she was faced with the harsh reality that her leadership had been called into question by someone she had once considered a close friend. The pain of this betrayal was evident in her response, which was defensive and dismissive of the criticisms levied against her. Joni insisted that she had always acted in the best interests of the network and that her personal life was not interfering with her role as its leader. However, many found it hard to reconcile her public statements with the concerns raised by Joyce and others within the network. The revelation from Joyce Meyer not only exposed deep divisions within Daystar, but also highlighted the larger issues of power, control, and loyalty within Christian media organizations. As more and more revelations about the inner workings of Daystar came to light, it became clear that the network was facing a crisis of leadership and direction. The fallout from Joyce's comments left many wondering whether Daystar could recover from the damage caused by the public fallout, and whether Joni Lamb could regain the trust of her family, staff, and supporters. As the dust settled from the explosive revelation, one thing was clear. The impact of Joyce Meyer's words had forever changed the landscape of Daystar television network. Whether Joni Lamb would be able to rebuild her reputation, restore her leadership, and unify the network once again remained to be seen. What had once been a beacon of hope and inspiration for millions was now mired in controversy and internal strife. The future of Daystar and the legacy of the Lamb family within the Christian media world was now in jeopardy. Only time would tell if they could navigate these troubled waters and emerge stronger on the other side. The future of Daystar Television Network and Joni Lamb's leadership now stands on uncertain ground after a series of events that have rocked both the organization and her personal life. Once a beacon of faith-based broadcasting, Daystar is now at a crossroads, with many wondering whether the network can recover from the controversies that have emerged and whether Joni is the right person to lead it forward. Joni Lamb's leadership at Daystar has always been deeply intertwined with her personal life. She co-founded the network alongside her late husband, Marcus Lamb, and together they built it into one of the largest Christian television networks in the world. Their shared vision of spreading the gospel through media was the cornerstone of Daystar's success. After Marcus's sudden passing, Joni faced the daunting task of continuing their legacy and holding the network together, a responsibility that many believe she has struggled with in the wake of personal and professional challenges. The speed at which Joni moved forward with her personal life, specifically her decision to marry Dr. Dougweiss just months after Marcus's death, raised eyebrows and caused concern within the Daystar community. For many, it appeared that Joni was rushing into a new chapter without fully grieving her husband's death, a decision that some viewed as emotionally irresponsible and damaging to the image of Daystar. Joni, who had always been seen as a strong and steady leader, now seemed to be making choices that were clouded by her personal emotions, rather than her role as the face of the network. This rapid transition was not only difficult for those closest to her, like her daughter Rebecca Lamb, but also for the broader Daystar family. The timing of the marriage and the speed at which Joni integrated Doug into the leadership of Daystar left many questioning her ability to lead effectively. Joni's decision to marry Doug so soon after Marcus's death was seen by some as a sign of her strength and determination to move on, but for others, it felt like a sign of instability. As Joni focused more on her personal life, many wondered if she was still committed to the network's mission and values, or if her personal desires were overtaking her professional responsibilities. Behind the scenes at Daystar, tensions were building. Joni's leadership style, which had once been collaborative and inclusive, began to shift toward a more authoritarian approach. As the months went by, many noticed that Joni was making more unilateral decisions, sidelining other key players in the ministry, and centralizing power in her own hands. For some, this felt like a betrayal of the values that Marcus and Joni had worked so hard to build. Daystar had always been seen as a family-run ministry, one where everyone had a voice and where decisions were made collectively. But now, it seemed that Joni was not only taking control but also distancing herself from those who had once been her closest allies. This shift in leadership style caused frustration among those within the network, particularly Joni's son, Jonathan Lamb. As the heir apparent to Daystar, Jonathan had spent years learning from his father and preparing to take on a larger role in the organization. But with Joni's increasing control over the network, Jonathan felt sidelined and excluded from the decisions that were shaping the future of Daystar. The tension between mother and son grew as Jonathan struggled to find his place in a ministry that no longer felt like the collaborative, family-oriented operation it once had been. As Joni's personal life became more entwined with her leadership at Daystar, it was clear that the network was facing a crisis of leadership. The staff and family members who had helped build Daystar from the ground up began to question whether Joni was still the right person to lead the network. With the addition of Dougweiss into the mix, many wondered if Joni was allowing her personal relationships to cloud her judgment and decision-making. Doug's increasing influence within Daystar, combined with Joni's shift toward a more controlling leadership style, made some insiders uncomfortable. They began to worry that the once collaborative spirit of Daystar was being replaced by a power struggle that threatened to undermine everything the network had stood for. The tension within Daystar became more palpable as the months went on, and the public began to notice the cracks in the network's foundation. Joni's leadership, once characterized by strength and faith, now seemed shaky and uncertain. As the network faced mounting internal conflicts, the question on everyone's mind was whether Joni was still capable of leading Daystar through the storm. Could she restore the network to its former glory, or had the damage already been done? For Joni, the pressure was immense. She had spent decades building Daystar into a global platform for Christian ministry, but now she was faced with the reality that her actions, both personal and professional, were putting the network at risk. The emotional toll of losing Marcus, navigating a new relationship, and dealing with the fallout from her leadership decisions had clearly affected Joni. She appeared more defensive, more isolated, and more concerned with protecting her personal interests than with leading Daystar through the challenges it was facing. As the situation became more complex, Joni's supporters remained steadfast in their loyalty to her. They believed that she was still the right person to lead Daystar, and that her personal struggles should not overshadow her leadership abilities. However, others began to question whether it was time for a change at the top. The network's future seemed uncertain, and the once unified Daystar family appeared to be fractured beyond repair.